So that was really just beautiful, and it's for me a very it's a strange experience hearing a former student like this, because it's a little bit like seeing your child grow up, and it's always my goal that my students will become their own musicians and kind of, what is it, the expression, take responsibility for your own face, and I think you really are doing that. So it's a joy to hear you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I was remembering when we first started working together, we had a conversation before you started lessons, and you were starting your master's program and you had just graduated from Brigham Young, and I remember asking you, like, what do you want to do? Like, let's think beyond the master's degree. Let's think to, your future. Do you remember that conversation?
I do. At least I'm pretty sure that I do. I remember talking on the phone with you in my apartment in Utah about what I wanted to do long term, and I remember having I've always wanted to perform. I always just love being able to connect with the audience and share the music that I love so much. And I remember talking to you, and you asked me, what are some like recital programs you might like to do? And at that time, I wasn't really like understanding the question. I was like, here's some pieces I might like to play, and you're encouraging me to think more specifically than that.
And to think more in terms of a point of view that
yes.
would be demonstrated through your programming, right?
Mm-hmm. And since then, we had that, conversation that really encouraged me to think about what is the voice that I want to share with my music, what is the perspective that I want to have, and what can I bring to the music world that hasn't been brought before, especially if I might be playing all the same pieces that other people have already played.
Yeah.
And that's how we actually got onto the Ravel project that I have been now working on since that conversation, pretty much. I expressed the idea of, well, maybe I might play all of Ravel's solo repertoire. I've always kind of thought about doing that. And you're like, that's been done before. Like, you need to think more specific or bigger. And so you had the idea of doing all of Ravel's music for piano. So that includes chamber music and art songs and concertos and
everything.
All of that.
Yeah, because people tend to sort of box themselves in and only do one thing or another. I thought it'd be really interesting that you could do everything.
And that's really changed. I mean, it's really changed my life. I'm not exaggerating when I say that. The Ravel project as a whole has changed my life, but also just that idea of a pianist not having to be just a solo pianist or just a chamber musician or just an accompanist or what have you. The idea that I can do all of it and do it well was really revolutionary for me, especially at that stage in my life.
That's so great. So then since then, when you were studying with me, you started learning different things, but since then you've created this project with our next guest, who is going to join you, Christina Cook. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And Christina, you joined Kessa for, well, it was a project, but also a concert series. Kessa, maybe just tell us the name of this concert series?
Yes, so the concert series is called Whimsical Birdsong, which is how I conceptualize Ravel's music. It's very whimsical, and he loved birds. And so that's where the name comes from. So
I can't remember if I showed you the video I took at Ravel's house of his,
yes, you did, of all of the mechanical birds he had in his house. I got that video before I named the concert. That's one of the things that contributed to the naming of the concert series. So the project Whimsical Birdsong has been a concert series to present all of the works of Ravel, as you encouraged, for piano in context with interesting programming, basically. Now, sometimes it's been like with other composers who complement Ravel or who were inspired by Ravel or who inspired Ravel in some way or another. And Christina was there at the very second concert, not the very first one, because the first one was at Manus and was all Manus students. But right as soon as we brought the concert series outside of Manus, she was performing right there from the very beginning. Every single art song that we put on the program that she did. And then after we were kind of getting into it, we were doing Scheherazade, which is actually originally an orchestral cycle, but we decided to put it on the program because it was so popular and do the piano reduction. And we brought it to our coach for the first time after we'd been rehearsing it together. And he had a book of Ravel's art songs and that he was reading from to give us the coaching. And after we sang the first song, he just kind of looked at us and he said, "You guys should perform this entire book. That was just so wonderful and so unique that you should perform and record the entire book." And that's what led us to where we are now, which is that we have learned that whole book, and it was kind of a few years project of doing all of Ravel's art songs. He wrote 32 of them.
Wow.
And we recorded them. We have an album. And we also performed them at Carnegie Hall this past December.
And I was in the audience.
And
was
Simone was in the
gorgeous,
audience, and it was just such a wonderful experience. I also memorized all the art songs because
Both of you memorized
Yeah.
them. That was quite something because that's very unusual to see two people collaborating like that completely by memory.
yeah,
Yeah.
we kind of thought about the memory part of it. You know, singers typically have to memorize everything. They don't frequently get to perform with music
Yes.
because it can inhibit the acting. And so I kind of thought to myself, well, if she's going to memorize anything, why shouldn't I?
Yeah, that's a great.
And so,
Christina,
did.
I'm curious. Is it different having a collaborator who's memorizing and who's like also like the lead on the project? Like, is that unusual for you?
It is less unusual for me, I think, because I have also an instrumental background. So I also play viola and violin, so I've performed in orchestras, I've played chamber music. And so what is very gratifying about this experience, it is much less pianist and singer and much more a chamber music type of experience. We're finding that when we're performing both from memory, we're able to listen to each other better, and the whole thing just gels together and becomes a much more gratifying musical experience, both for us and for our audience too.
That's wonderful. Well, I certainly enjoyed the concert so much, and we're going to get a little sample of those works now. And I thought maybe, Christina, you could tell us which songs you're going to play for us, sing for us.
So we will perform 4 songs today, and I love how it came about that these songs are also very descriptive in what they are trying to convey. So our first song will be Noël des Jouets, which literally means Christmas of the Toys. And you had mentioned the mechanical birds earlier. Ravel's father was actually an engineer and passed on to Ravel a love for all things mechanical, and you can actually hear like toy rabbits beating their drums over the course of the song, and from the very first chord you hear the magic and the wonder of a Christmas morning, just describing that scene. So you can hear the mechanical toys, you hear a playful part where the dog Beelzebub is waiting in the corner wanting to eat the sugar Jesus, and angels at the end hanging from their silver strings, and finally at the end a chorus of all of the toys, you know, essentially singing Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas. It's really great. The next song on a completely different tone is Le Grand Vent, and this one, the poetry itself is pretty cryptic actually, but the music very much shows the storm coming and going. So it opens with the wind kind of whooshing in, and the storm happening, and then it backs off a little bit as we get into the eye of the storm, and then really coming in again full force, like beating the wind, beating the doors. And then you can hear at the end as the storm is drifting off over the sea, you hear the little lightning flashes.
And the piano.
In the piano, yes. Yes. So the next song, Sur l'herbe, is literally a drunken lawn party. So these are different people at the party talking to each other with all of their kind of sometimes nonsensical phrases as they're chatting at this lawn party. So it's a really whimsical, fun piece. And you can hear in the piano, again, the sort of off-kilter rhythms as these people are sort of stumbling about in their party. So it's a fun song. The last one, La Pintade, it means the guinea fowl, and it is the fifth of the song cycle, Histoire naturelle, which is basically a description of different animals. And anybody who has ever seen a video or heard the cry of a guinea fowl will hear it in this song, definitely.
Okay. And if you're from Brooklyn, you just have to imagine it.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Fair enough. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Well, I can't wait to hear the two of you play these and sing these 4 songs. Thank you. I'd like to welcome back Kessa Mefford
Thank
to
you.
join in a conversation with Mark, Irchai, and myself. Mark is also one of my former students, and it's just a joy to have both of you here together in the same room. And I'm just so proud of both of you and what incredible musicians you both are, and how generous you are as musicians in the way that you play with your partners. I think that that's really just such a great thing to hear, is that you're listening and responding and supporting and also leading, all of those things, which is great.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a great way to come back together. I don't think we've been in the same room since before the pandemic, actually.
Yeah, I think so.
So it's a really funny way that pursuing similar projects led us back to the same place. With you, Simone. So.
Yes, yeah, you were both studying with me in 2020 when the pandemic came about. I remember watching Kessa's graduation on Zoom and having a cheering you on with my husband and son from our house to your house.
Yes.
And then unfortunately for Mark, the next year he had to do his graduation recital on Zoom. But it was, even though it was on Zoom, it was an incredibly memorable concert. And I remember everybody, there were many people watching, and then we all had a kind of session talking to you about it afterwards, and it was really very special.
It was. There are people who are still talking about it to this day. Which,
Yeah, I
means
remember.
a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it was really beautiful. It's gorgeous. So I'm just curious to have you both here, because now you've both been out of school for 2 years now, and I remember that time myself in my own life, and I remember how incredibly uncertain everything was, and I'm just curious about life for you. I know that you both are teaching a lot too, right? I mean, that's kind of, as pianists, that's a way that we can have a core income, I would say.
Absolutely, yeah. Teaching is definitely a big part of my income, at least at this stage.
Yeah, it makes sense, right? And you have your own studio, right?
Yes.
In Peekskill?
Mhm.
Yeah. And Mark, you're actually on the faculty of some institutions, right? So.
Right, so I teach at the Levine School, and I'm also a collaborative pianist at George Mason University.
Okay, great. All right, and the Levine School is down in Washington, D.C.
That's
yeah.
right. Mm-hmm.
But both of you have had some other interesting avenues that have come up. Like Mark, I've been seeing how more and more you're conducting.
Yeah, I've sort of fallen into that within the past 8-9 months, which was always something that interested me. I remember doing a Mozart concerto for the piano back in undergrad, and I hadn't found my way back into it until some opportunities in opera came along, and so I did a production in February with Amanda as the leading role of Dinah in Leonard Bernstein's Trouble in Tahiti, and with Loud and Lyric Opera, of which I'm now artistic director.
Fantastic.
So that's been kind of a very fascinating thing to add within the whole sphere of the piano world.
That's wonderful, and I mean, I know that Kessa, you're also involved in opera, because it's really kind of, you have to reveal it, your father's.
I do. So I grew up in kind of an opera household. My father is the general director of an opera company, and so I probably knew opera before I knew any piano music, just from hearing it sung all day at my house and all the voice students and going to performances before I understood what they were. I have been playing for my father's opera company.
Which is the Taconic Opera.
Taconic Opera, yes, in northern Westchester County in New York. And so I've been involved in that as rehearsal pianist for a while. Unlike Mark, I am actually leaving the opera business slightly. I love opera and I always will, and I'm very grateful because Taconic Opera is how I met Christina. But I'm moving more towards recital work at this point in my life, whether solo or chamber music or art song recitals, and very excited about that.
Wonderful, that's great. And I'm also, like Mark, the other thing that you've kind of kept a little hidden under your belt is that you also improvise.
Yeah, I was exploring during the pandemic one of my ways of preserving sanity. Was I had set up a, believe it or not, a Twitch account, and I was live streaming improvising to various prompts that people were giving. So people would give me colors or lines of prose that I would have to create some kind of musical piece to. I also did a really great performance along those lines with Milad Yusufi, where
My other student.
that's
at that
right.
time,
Where he was painting artwork that as a response to my improvisation. But I had it set up so that I could see what he was painting at the same time. So it became kind of a two-way conversation.
Because he was responding to what he heard and you were responding
That's
to what you
amazing.
saw.
Exactly,
Yeah,
right.
I remember watching that. That was really.
Are any of those streams like saved? Because I would love to
The
go back
one with
and see
Milad
those.
is available on Facebook, yes.
Wow.
Yeah,
We have to look up Mark's Facebook again.
there you go,
Yes.
yes. Do a little Facebook stalking, yeah.
And during this whole pandemic period, one thing that has come out of it for a lot of musicians is that they became much more interested in the recording process, right? And in documenting what they're doing and learning how to use recording equipment. I remember, Mark, you were kind of my instructor in all things Zoom, and I know that Kessa, you went on and you did 2 CDs. Well, you did one you did before the pandemic, but the one that you did with Christina, you did since then. But Mark, I know that you're about to record, and I'm not sure. Are you going to record it yourself, or are you going to go and have another engineer help you out with that?
No, this is too big for little old me.
Okay. Right.
No, I'm working with Mike Dukaso, who is the chief recording engineer for the President's Own Marine Band.
Oh.
He's been a dear friend for a very long time, and so he and his business partner, Irchai, are working with me, and I'm really grateful for the help with this project.
That's so great. So we're going to hear some music from that. So tell us a little bit about it, because I love the whole theme.
Yeah, so to talk about the CD first, so it's a program called Scenes of Childhood. I wanted to portray in sonic form the progression of a young person from the very beginning to the point at which they begin to reflect upon their beginnings. And so it was very important for me to find a way to do that that, number one, spoke to some of my truths as a growing person, but also that could create the space for resonance for listeners and audience members for this program. So, speaking of my improvisation, the program itself begins with some Chicoria selections from his children's songs. I'm specifically pulling from a set of selections that he would perform with a lot, from a set that he did in Munich in 1985, which includes some improvisation. So on the album, there will be some original
Oh,
improvisation.
are you going to kind of prelude, like, between pieces?
Not between everything. Some of them are designed really to flow together very well, but there are moments where Chicoria added things, and I think the places he did make sense, and I might find other opportunities for that too.
Okay.
To just to, I found that in concert it tends to be a kind of an uninterrupted flow when performed in concert.
You mean from one piece of music to
Mhm.
the next?
Yes, yeah.
And are you going to try to capture that on the CD?
That's the hope, yeah.
I've had that challenge myself because I, in my last CD, it was it's called Undersong. It's a program that I also play without any break when I perform it, and I wanted to have that. Of course, people don't really listen to albums in the same way anymore, so it's hard to capture that, but I think it might be possible.
I think the shuffle button is both a blessing and a curse in that sense. But I think that's kind of great in that, you know, it offers opportunities for bouncing around the CD. And I think that you know, life is not a straight line. And so I think it's interesting for someone to bounce a little, as we would more realistically do.
Yeah.
Anyway. So After the Chick Corea is a piece by Peggy Glanville Hicks. She was an Australian composer, and her piece is called Prelude for a Pensive Pupil.
Oh.
It starts to bring in, I think, a little bit of the teenage angst into the mix, which flows in wonderfully to Bela Bartok's Six Dances in Bulgarian Rhythm, which concludes his Mikrokosmos, the progressive method of 153 pieces for piano students. And then from there, we get two pieces that are titled Scenes of Childhood. One is a piece by Federico Mompou, a Catalan composer, his Scène d'Enfant, which is a sort of impressionistic painting of life as a young person. And then Robert Schumann's Kinderzenen, which is much more of the perspective of an adult taking the time to reflect on their childhood.
Childhood remembered.
Mhm.
Wonderful. So we're gonna hear today some of the Bartok and Schumann, I think?
That's right. So I've put together a set that is a little bit like what you would get if you press the shuffle button, actually. But I think you will find that it allows some room for both some of the Schumann selections and some of the Bartok selections to resonate in a really unique way. So I'm starting with the Schumann von Fremden und den hohen Menschen, the Foreign Lands and Peoples, and then dances 4 and 5 from the Bulgarian, from Bartok. Then we pivot to Schumann's Traumerei, Bartok's dance number 6, and finally Schumann's Der Dichter spricht, Poet Speaks.